Hi everyone. I'd like to take a moment and talk about PowerShell, how we can actually use the power of PowerShell in VBA. So in whether it be Excel, Access, Outlook, Word, it does make a difference. PowerShell extends and gives us access to a whole series of commandlets that then allow us to do a whole slew of different things, gather information, or even change things. You think of your hard drive, you think of, just getting computer information in the OS. You can get into Active Directory and users, and the list just goes on and on and on. And I wanted to explore how we could tap into that through VBA. So let's dive in. Before we dive directly into VBA code and examples, demonstrations, I want to first start off with my website. You're going to see I have several pages actually on PowerShell, but the page that is of interest in particular today is this first one, which was all about how to run PowerShell in VBA. And in it, you're going to see I explain the evolution of what I started off with initially and how I changed it, iterated it because of different problems that I faced until I got the commands that we have today that work properly. And you're going to see there are two main ones of interest. You have PS execute and you have PS get output. So PS execute runs a command. PS get output runs a command, but it waits and brings back whatever is returned by that command. So if you're using PowerShell, for instance, to gather information, well, then you're going to use the get output because you want to collect whatever's returned and bring it back into your VBA environment to be able to work with it and use it however you choose. And then a little bit later on, I go on to, well, there are commands, many PowerShell commands that won't run unless you're an elevated user, unless you're running as an administrator. And so I created commands for that. And they're here, and everything you need to know is there as well. So you have the PS admin execute and you have the PS admin get output. So they're the equivalent of the other two. It's just as administrators. So you can go through the page if you want to learn a little bit more about the process, how I got here. Now let's look at a concrete real life usage of it. So I started off with, as you can see, an Access database, but this will work just fine in Excel, Word, Outlook. It doesn't make a difference. And as you can see here, I've broken it up, made different modules for different subjects, different categories. Let's just take a glance here to begin with. We have the mod PowerShell. Now that's the heart of everything. And basically it's what's on my web page I put here. So as you can see, the PS execute, the PS get output, the admin get output, etc. So this is the core that allows us then to create the other modules that use these commands to do things. So what do they allow us to do? Well, they allow us to do almost anything you want. If you're not familiar with PowerShell, PowerShell works with what's called commandlets. You call commandlets to do things. And there are tons and tons of commandlets to do just about everything. And if a commandlet doesn't exist, you can even create your own if you're knowledgeable enough. So, here I've just dabbled a little bit here with files, hashing, getting image information, things like that, your printers and system information. But it goes far beyond that. You can get into Active Directory. You can get into all sorts of things. So just don't think that because I only have these modules that's it, because it's far from being that. You're going to see a theme here that for most of all of these, it's you build a PowerShell command or you go Google and find what you need, and then you bring it into the VBA and you can create a new function to use it. And in a lot of cases, that's what I did. A lot of this has been me researching about PowerShell. How do I do this in PowerShell? And then, okay, now that I know how to do in PowerShell, let's bring it into VBA. So let's start off with hashing. Okay, we want to hash something. This is a technique that can be used, for instance, to find duplicate files. Well, I created a simple function here where you pass it a file, so a path file name, and you tell it which hashing algorithm you want to use. So if we wanted to test it out, not very hard, we just come here. We need to put a file. And that's one of the support files on my desktop that I showed earlier briefly. And then you pick your algorithm. Which algorithm do you want? So I want to do, let's say, an MD5 hash, and we test it. And there it is. I want to get a SHA-256, and there it is. So as you can see, it's very flexible. You've got a multitude of different hashing algorithms you can use, and you're operational just by copying this, and you're good to go. Then I also decided, okay, well, it's nice to hash a file, but what happens if I want to hash simply a string? I just want to be able to pass it some text and hash. Well, that can easily be achieved as well. So we just come here and do a hello world, and you now have a hashed string. And I also have here a way of comparing. I wanted to see, well, does hashing a file equal the hash of the exact same content of that file as a string? So I made an ini file with the same content that I have here as a string. So they are equivalent in content, but one is a file, one is a VBA string. I was just curious what it would give. And if you run it, so this is going to hash the file, this is going to hash the string, and then I just did a simple comparison. And as you can see, the hashes are the same and they're true, so they are equal one to the other. Just a proof of concept that the hashing was working properly. Okay. Images. Well, images. What if I want to get information about my image? Now, I have on my blog numerous ways to do this. We can do it through, GDI and free image library. There's tons of ways, but I wanted to see, can we do this in PowerShell? Sure enough, yes, you can. And here I have a simple test. I'm pulling that same picture one off my desktop, and I just want to read the properties of that file. So if we just run the test here, it's going to grab that file, it's going to break out the properties and then list them back to me. So you can see all the variety of different properties that are actually embedded in that file for us. So as you can see, very easy. All I'm doing here, as I said, I'm grabbing my PS get image info, and it's going to return, because I'm using the get output in it, it's going to return what it extracts. And then I'm doing a replace. There's an issue sometimes with certain characters, so I just do a fast replace. And then it's returning the information in two parts. So I separated lines with this, and then I separated values from their properties with that. So I just split it once to get all my different properties, and then here I'm splitting it again to split the property from the actual value of the property, and then I just debug print them to me. So I know it sounds a little complex, but it truly isn't. It's just I needed a line separator and I needed a property / value separator. And that's it. Like, once you have this guy, once you've developed your function, you can now call it over and over on any file you want. It's no more complicated than that. We can look at office information. Well, office information. Well, what type of update channel are you currently on? A very common question in forums when you're looking for support. Well, with PowerShell, it's very easy to achieve. And I pull it out and I'm giving you in plain English. You are running on the current channel. So there's another example, a very useful example with PowerShell. Printers. Printers, the same thing. You can gather any information you want. You can change things with printers. Everything's accessible through the right commandlet. And here we go. get a list here of installed printers. And then the same thing as per usual, I have a function that I'm using here to test it. So it's using the command above, and then I'm going to break it by line, and then I break it again here between different values and properties, etc. So I'm able to then just run it once, and it will export, output all the information I want. Printer, the location, the drive, and the type. In my case, you're not going to get a location because this is all local to me. But if you were in an enterprise environment, you'd have that information as well. The same thing here, you want to get the default printer name. Okay, you want to get the default printer info. Okay, so you can just run the test routine that I wrote, and it will pull out your printer. The default printer is Microsoft Print to PDF, the driver is Microsoft Print to TF, and the type is it's a local printer. So as you can see, it's very easy. You can even change the default printer. So right now, the default printer is the Print to PDF. If we come here and run this, and now we test our default printer again, it will now have switched to the XPF. So you can use PowerShell to change a printer, a setting, very easily without having to get into any other advanced things. As you can see, it's a single line, a single command. System variables, things like that. Very easy once again. You can list the system variables. There they are. You can get a specific variable if you want. Let's get the user. Daniel. You can get anything you want. Like any of those system variables, you can then retrieve. So you can use this to get the list that then you can use here to pull. List environment variables. All the different environment variables. Or you want to get a specific one, you can get a specific one. There you go. So as you can see, it's very easy, very simple, very straightforward, and it's always built upon the same thing. You build a command, your PowerShell command, and then you run it. You either execute it or you get its output, which I return, and then you use however you want. It's always the same principle. Build a command, use it. Build a command, use it. Build a command, use it. Windows information. You know, once again, whatever you need, it's all accessible through PowerShell. You know, here they're split separately. Here they're all concatenated together. It's really your choice. So I hope you're starting to see it's always the same concept. It's always the same approach. That's the beauty of it. Once you know your PowerShell command, then you can easily use it in VBA. So you build the command, you use it. You build the command, you use it, and so on and so forth. Installed software. Once again, I have a couple examples here how it works. But once again, we build a command, we grab the output. I build a command, I grab the output. Installed software can be stored in different locations, the information, so you actually have to hit different places to get it. But just to illustrate, if we run this guy, you're going to see you get one list, which is a very short list. And then if you run this guy, you get another list of installed software. So and this is how you can go about getting the full list of information. But as you can see, all of that information is accessible, and it's always the same thing. Build the command, access it. That's it. Files. Well, I have here, I want to print files, to print all the files in a directory, to open a file. If we open a file again, and there's the image. I know it's hard to see, it's black on dark gray, but there is an image there. And so you can open any file. So we're lucky in Access, we have the follow hyperlink and things like that. But now you can, through PowerShell, open it in any other application you want. The last one, ODBC. It's the exact same thing. So let's take a look. What is installed on this computer? Well, if we take a look, it's a very simple list. I have SQL Server Driver 32-bit and 64-bit. Okay? So you see here, it's always the same thing. It's always the same methodology. It's a question of going online or playing in the PowerShell ISE and building up your commands. And once you get the commands right and you're getting the output you want, then you take that command from the PowerShell ISE and you bring it into VBA. You put it in the proper quotes like I did here, and then you're able to then just call it whenever you need. So this truly is where the internet becomes your best friend to help you develop the proper code, the proper PowerShell commands. But once you've got that established, now with the 4 basic commands that I created, you can basically do anything inside VBA with PowerShell now. I know that was a fast overview. I didn't want to get bogged down in PowerShell commands. That goes really beyond the VBA, the Database Excel Outlook. It really is a course on its own. Well, it's more than just a course. And there's lots of really good resources out there to learn PowerShell per se. And I didn't want to mix up everything here in this one video. I really wanted to concentrate on the VBA side of things, which is those 4 commands, and then you build a command, you run it. You build a command, you run it. The one thing that I will quickly just emphasize, I briefly touched upon it, but I think it's worth just noting again. When you're returning the information from PowerShell, you know, in the ISE, it displays it nicely at the bottom. You get the output you want. But when you're dealing in VBA, you need to be able to distinguish and break up the return data. And that's why you're going to see in my commands, I use separators in the information. So then later, I'm able to latch on to that, the special characters, I'm able to latch onto it to split that array so that I can then process them one by one with a for each. So that's the one difference when you're taking the command from PowerShell and bringing it into VBA, that it becomes sometimes necessary to just throw in those little tweaks. So then it's easier for you down here to do the processing. And I should also note one thing I didn't do here, but it's worth noting because I've used it elsewhere myself, is you can also take a PowerShell command and output it to a file. So if you didn't necessarily want to use the returned information or whatever in a VBA, but you wanted to generate a file with the information, well, that's very easy to do too. You can pipe it to an external file, create a text file, create a CSV. All of those things are very easy to do through PowerShell. Be a great reason to do a follow-up video, actually. So just know, if you can do it in PowerShell, you can do it here. It's just a question of being aware of what PowerShell can do. I hope this has been informative. I hope you found this useful. I know when I first developed all of this, I truly didn't find much information. I know more has come out over the years, but for me, this was all cutting edge at the time, and that's why I wanted to explore it back then. I hope this enables you to explore it and dabble with PowerShell and VBA and see the type of power that it can actually bring you, because it truly can bring some impressive features and capabilities that just are very hard to achieve in other ways. There are other aspects of it where, yeah, why would I do it in PowerShell when there's an easier way to do it? And that's true too. So don't just think that because you have a PowerShell command that is the way to do it. I wouldn't use PowerShell typically to get environment variables and things like that. But there are other things where it just excels and is faster. So that also can be where timing some of these different approaches can become useful to determine if PowerShell is the efficient way to go or not. We'll leave it there for today. Please leave me comments. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking of this. Is this something that's useful to you? Have you played around with PowerShell? Have you played around with PowerShell in VBA? What do you use it for? It'd be great to get some other ideas of using PowerShell and VBA. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your day with me. If you're able to give me a thumbs up or subscribe or even promote the video in any way, it'd be greatly appreciated. And have a great day.